Some killers crave power, others kill for pleasure, but the most disturbing are those who show no remorse. Today, we step into the twisted minds of child murderers, serial predators, and killers who met their end on death row. Their final moments, last words, and the horrifying crimes that sealed their fate. This is a descent into pure evil. Ted Bundy. The women who crossed paths with him never suspected a thing. He was charming, intelligent, and disarmingly polite. He had a warm smile, an effortless way of making people feel at ease. But beneath that mask of civility, Ted Bundy was a hunter, one who lured his prey with calculated precision before unleashing a monster that defied human comprehension. During the 1970s, Bundy wove a cross-country web of terror, abducting, assaulting, and murdering at least 30 young women. The real number? No one knows. It could be 50. It could be 100. The monster took most of his secrets to the grave. His methods were horrific. He often faked injury, walking with a cast or crutches, pretending to struggle with books or needing help loading something into his car. When a kind-hearted woman stopped to help, the trap was set. The moment she let her guard down, he struck, bludgeoning her into submission before shoving her into his Volkswagen Beetle, where the door handle on the passenger side had been removed. Once inside, there was no way out. For some, the horror was swift. For others, it stretched into hours of unimaginable torment. He essayed, tortured, and strangled his victims, often returning to their lifeless bodies days later to violate them again. In some cases, he decapitated them and kept their severed heads as trophies, a grotesque reminder of his dominance over life and death. But Bundy's most infamous act of savagery came on January 15, 1978. Having escaped from prison just weeks earlier, he broke into the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University. It was the middle of the night. The women inside were sleeping. Bundy moved through the rooms like a phantom, beating and strangling 4 victims within minutes. 2 of them, Margaret Bowman and Lisa Levy, never woke up. When he left, the walls were splattered with blood. His rampage ended weeks later when he was caught driving a stolen car. This time, there was no escape. The trial was a circus, with Bundy catching all the attention. He cross-examined witnesses, charmed reporters, and even proposed to his girlfriend in open court. But the jury saw through the performance. The sentence was death. January 24, 1989. Outside Rayford Prison in Florida, a crowd had gathered chanting, "Burn Bundy, burn." Inside, the killer who had once held entire states in terror was shackled to the electric chair known as Old Sparky. He was given the standard last meal: steak, eggs, toast with jelly, hash browns, coffee, milk, and juice. He barely touched it. Maybe for the first time he had lost his appetite for flesh. He was asked his final words. Bundy hesitated, then said, "I'd like you to give my love to my family and friends." At 7:16 a.m., 2,000 volts of electricity surged through his body. In minutes, the man who had inflicted so much pain was nothing more than a smoldering corpse. But the nightmares he created? They would never stay alive forever. Charles Michael Albanese. The old man sat behind his desk, his hands folded, his face etched with quiet disappointment. Across from him stood his son, Charles Michael Albanese, his jaw tight, his fingers curling into fists at his sides. The room was thick with unspoken resentment. He didn't want him in his company anymore, his father finally said. The words were final, like a death sentence. Charles didn't argue, didn't lash out. He just smiled, nodded, and left. But inside he was boiling with rage. He had worked too hard to be tossed aside like some nobody. His whole life, he had wanted wealth, power, status. And now, when he was this close, his father was threatening to take it all away? A few days later, his father changed his mind. He wouldn't cut Charles out completely. Instead, he demoted him to treasurer. A compromise, a peace offering. Charles accepted it, and then he got to work. First, it was small things: a plate of homemade cookies for his father, a snack here and there for his younger brother, Michael Jr. Thoughtful little gestures, the kind of things a good son does, the kind of things no one would suspect. Within days, Michael Jr. fell violently ill, uncontrollable vomiting, agonizing stomach pain, his body betraying him in ways he didn't understand. Then his father followed. The same sickness, the same agony. Months passed, their conditions worsening, their bodies weakening. And then, on May 16, 1981, Michael Albanese Sr. was dead. Natural causes, they said, nothing suspicious, perfect. With his father gone, Charles inherited nearly $270,000 and secured his place at the head of the company. Everything was falling into place. And yet, this wasn't his last time playing God. Months earlier, he had set his sights on two other targets: Marion Muller, his mother-in-law, and Mary Lambert, her elderly mother. The women lived together at Leisure Village, a quiet little retirement community in Fox Lake. Charles made a habit of visiting them, bringing little gifts, showering them with attention. The perfect son-in-law. But behind the charming smiles and thoughtful gestures, he was planning. Slowly, he convinced Lambert to rewrite her will, ensuring that her financial assets would bypass her other children and go straight to his wife. Step 1, complete. And step 2? Well, that was easy. Charles had done his research. He reached out to a metal plating operator in Wisconsin, asking about the best way to get rid of pests. He walked away with a lethal dose of arsenic and very specific instructions on how to use it. And then the deaths began. On August 6, 1980, Marion Muller fell violently ill, nausea, severe diarrhea, body-racking convulsions. Within hours, she was dead. Heart attack, the doctors said. 12 days later, Mary Lambert suffered the same fate. The elderly woman was rushed to St. Therese Hospital, barely conscious, her frail body shutting down. She never stood a chance. Natural causes, the doctors claimed once again. No one questioned it. Two women, gone within days of each other, both deaths deemed natural. The town panicked. Rumors spread like wildfire. Something was in the water. Something was poisoning people. The Lake County Health Department launched a full-scale investigation, testing the food, the water, the air. But they found nothing. The hysteria faded. The town moved on. And Charles? He and his wife walked away $150,000 richer. 3 deaths, 3 inheritances, and not a single suspicion. Until the coroner took a second look. When Michael Sr. died, Alvin Querhammer, the McHenry County coroner, examined his body. In his bloodstream, he found arsenic. It wasn't a lot, but it was enough. A red flag. Querhammer reached out to Robert H. Babcox, the Lake County coroner, who had handled Muller and Lambert's deaths the year before. The pieces started falling into place. A decision was made. Exhume the bodies. The bodies of Marion Muller and Mary Lambert were pulled from the ground, their graves disturbed by the hands of justice. And inside their decaying remains, hidden within bones and flesh long turned to dust, was arsenic. A grotesque fingerprint, a whisper from beyond the grave. Now there was no doubt. This was murder. The investigation picked up speed. The McHenry Police Department dug into Charles Michael Albanese's past, peeling away the layers of deception like rotting flesh. What they found was damning: a history of financial troubles, fraud, and a dangerous hunger for wealth. His criminal record stretched back decades: burglary, auto theft, unpaid child support. A man who took what he wanted and never looked back. And then they found the final piece. Charles had made one fatal mistake. During their investigation, detectives traced his steps to a metal plating company in Wisconsin, where he had bought arsenic. He thought no one would remember, that it was a quiet, forgettable transaction. But the supplier remembered him asking questions, remembered him learning how to kill. It was enough. On November 18, 1981, police stormed into his office at Allied Die Casting and placed him under arrest. The man who had lived lavishly, boasting expensive cars, exotic vacations, a life built on the bodies of his own blood, was now cuffed like a common criminal. He was charged with the murders of his father, his mother-in-law, and his grandmother-in-law, as well as the attempted murder of his brother, Michael Jr. And then came the trials. Charles was tried twice, once in Lake County for his father's murder and the poisoning of his brother, and again in McHenry County for the death of his mother-in-law. In both courtrooms, the evidence was overwhelming. He sat silent as the verdict was read. He was found guilty. And then his sentence: death. The court was clear. This was not just a man who had killed. This was a man who had betrayed the sacred bond of family, a wolf dressed in blood-soaked sheep's clothing. And for that, he would die. For 14 years, Albanese sat on death row, fighting his sentence. He swore he was innocent, that it was all a setup, that his brother had done it, that the police had planted evidence. No one listened. On September 20th, 1995, justice came calling. He was led to the execution chamber at Stateville Correctional Center, where the lethal injection table awaited. His face was blank. No fear, no remorse. His last meal consisted of prime rib, baked potato, garlic bread, coffee, Coca-Cola, pistachio ice cream, a king's feast for a man who had slaughtered his own blood. As they strapped him down, the guards asked if he had any final words. He said nothing, just a simple thank you, as if he was being handed a favor instead of being put down like the poisoner he was. The needle plunged into his skin, and as the drugs flooded his veins, Charles Michael Albanese, a man who killed for money, who played the long game of death, who poisoned his own father, his own mother-in-law, his own blood, finally tasted what he had served to others. A slow, silent death. A fitting end for a man who thought he could get away with murder. Franklin Dwayne Alex. The streets of Houston, Texas, had no idea a monster was lurking in the shadows. A man who thrived on fear, power, and blood. A predator who stalked apartment complexes, hunting for victims in parking lots, stairwells, and outside their own homes. Franklin Dwayne Alex wasn't just a criminal, he was a walking nightmare. 3 murders, 2 attempted murders, 4 kidnappings, 9 robberies, 2 rapes. His crime spree in the late 90s drenched Houston in blood, and by the time it ended, families were left shattered, haunted by the horrors he inflicted. This is the story of a killer who terrorized a city and the justice that finally put him down. Franklin Dwayne Alex was born in Harris County, Texas. He sang in the church choir. He taught Sunday school. Then something in him snapped. By 17, he was stealing cars, leading police on high-speed chases, and carrying illegal weapons. By 22, he was a full-blown predator. And in August 1997, he unleashed hell on the people of Houston. His reign of terror began in an apartment parking lot on August 8, 1997. Gregorio Ramirez, 41, was just trying to make it home. Alex pulled the trigger, leaving Ramirez bleeding in the pavement. His widow identified the killer, but Alex wasn't done. Days later, he was stealing gas, beating store owners, and robbing women in broad daylight. And then the kidnappings began. On September 29, a woman steps out of her car at an apartment complex. Alex is waiting. Gun in hand, he shoves her into the trunk, slams it shut, and drives off. But he doesn't take her home. He pulls over, he opens the trunk, and he makes her perform oral sex on him before vanishing into the night. On December 6th, Alex ambushes a security guard at an apartment complex, makes him turn around and run. Then he shoots him in the back. Miraculously, the man survives. On December 19, a townhouse security guard wasn't so lucky. Alex hunts him down, shoots him, and leaves him bleeding in the street. Hours later, he's robbing another man when the victim escapes, opens his car trunk, and finds a woman inside. She had been robbed. She had been raped. She had been left for dead. But Alex was just getting started. January 3rd, 1998. The 19-year-old Carol Bridgeford pulls into her driveway. Before she can even get out, Alex pounces. Gun pointed at her face, he shoves her into her own trunk and slams it shut. Her screams go unheard as he drives into the night. He threatens her, tells her she'd better have money or she'll die tonight. Carol, desperate to survive, says he can take whatever he wants from her house. Alex drives there. He rapes her. He steals her belongings. He strips her dignity away piece by piece. Then a sound. The door swings open. Carol's 23-year-old brother, Eric, and his friend walk in, and Alex sees danger. The men turn and run, but Alex chases them down. He raises the gun and pulls the trigger. Eric dies in a pool of his own blood. But Alex isn't done. He drives back to an apartment complex, finds another woman, forces her into her trunk, and drives off again. This time, he lets her live. One day later, Christopher Thomas, 34, sits in his car, listening to music outside his home, enjoying his life. Until Alex walks up and puts a bullet in his head. January 6, 1998. Police finally catch the devil in the flesh. They put him in cuffs, drag him away. In custody, he confesses on videotape. Shows them where he hid the murder weapon. There's no remorse. No guilt. At his trial, he smirks. When witnesses cry, he rolls his eyes. He claims the sex was consensual, that the stolen items were gifts, that Eric charged at him, forcing him to shoot. But the jury sees through the lies. On August 26, 1998, Franklin Dwayne Alex was found guilty of capital murder, and on September 2, 1998, he was sentenced to die. For 12 years, Alex waited on death row, filing appeals, picking fights, telling reporters he was just a victim of bad influences. But no one cared. On March 30, 2010, the execution chamber at the Huntsville unit is ready. A prison guard asks him, "What do you want for your last meal?" Alex declines. He doesn't deserve a final meal. As they strap him down, his victims' families watch from behind the glass. The mother of Eric Bridgeford is there. Christopher Thomas's sister is there. They are waiting for justice. The warden asks if he has any last words. And the man who slaughtered, raped, and destroyed so many lives says this: "I am not the monster they made me out to be. I made lots of mistakes that took your son. I messed up, made poor choices. I'll take it to the grave. I will be at peace. It is what it is. I got peace in my heart." No apologies, no real remorse, just hollow words from a hollow soul. Then the executioner does what Alex had done to others so many times before. He flips the switch, and in 7 minutes, the nightmare is over. Danny Lee Barber. In the late 1970s, Dallas County, Texas, became the hunting ground of a sadistic predator. A man who didn't just kill, but also violated the dead. His name was Danny Lee Barber, and for nearly 2 years, he left behind a trail of battered bodies, broken families, and chilling confessions. On October 8, 1979, in the quiet town of Balch Springs, 50-year-old Janice Ingram was alone in her home. Outside, Danny Lee Barber roamed her property, a metal pipe in his hands. He wasn't supposed to be there. But when he noticed an open door, the opportunity was too tempting. He slipped inside. What happened next was sheer horror. Janice saw him. She screamed, but Barber wasn't about to let her live. He bludgeoned her face and head with the pipe. She wouldn't stop screaming, so he stabbed her in the throat, silencing her forever. Her naked corpse remained undiscovered for over 2 weeks. On October 26th, her mother, Ruth Clowers, and her brother, Roy Clowers, found her decaying body. They had known Barber before. He had done manual labor around their property. Now he had destroyed their family. Barber might have gotten away with it if he hadn't been arrested on May 4, 1980, for breaking into a flea market. While behind bars, he did something unexpected. He confessed, and not just to Janice Ingram's murder. He admitted to 3 other killings. Mary Caperton, 39, murdered on April 21, 1980. Raymond Curley, murdered on June 18, 1978. Mercedes Mendez, aka Mercy Mendez, 48, beaten, molested, and shot 3 times in the head before being dumped in a wooded area near Mesquite on January 17, 1979. But his crimes were even more disturbing. Barber didn't stop after his victims were dead. He sexually violated 2 of the corpses, a horrifying detail that cemented him as one of the most depraved killers in Texas history. In August 1980, Barber was convicted. The punishment was severe death for the murder of Janice Ingram and life in prison for 2 other murders. Justice was swift, but execution wasn't. His death was scheduled for January 2, 1988. Then, at the last moment, Supreme Court Justice Byron White issued a stay of execution due to a legal technicality. Barber was spared temporarily. For the next 11 years, he sat on death row, waiting to meet his fate. On February 11, 1999, justice finally came. Barber was strapped to the lethal injection gurney inside the Huntsville unit. Victims' families gathered behind the glass. They needed to see the monster die. Barber was given the chance for final words. His statement was a mix of regret and self-pity. He said in his last words, "Hello, Ms. Ingram, it is good to see you. I said I could talk, but I don't think I'm going to be able to. I heard one of your nieces had some angry words. I didn't have anything to do with the stay. I spent the last 20 years waiting to figure out what's going on. I pray that you get over it, and that's the only thing I can think to say. I'm regretful for what I done, but I'm a different person from that time. If you could get to know me over the years, you could have seen it. I've got some people over here that believe that. I want to talk to my friends over here for a second. Well, it's good to see you guys. Look after Mary Lynn for me. Like I said, I've called my mother already, so she knows. Goodbye." Then the executioner flipped the switch, and within minutes, the necrophile killer was dead. The Lonely Hearts Killers, a match made in hell. Some love stories are written in blood. The newspapers called them the Lonely Hearts Killers. Their victims simply called them monsters. Raymond Martinez Fernandez wasn't always a murderer. Born in Hawaii in 1914 to Spanish immigrants, he grew up to be a seaman and even worked for British intelligence during World War II. But a head injury changed him. When a steel hatch crashed onto his skull, it did more than leave a scar. It rewired something deep inside him. He emerged from the hospital a different man, one drawn to dark forces. In prison for petty theft, he met an inmate who introduced him to voodoo, black magic, and the belief that he could control women through mystical charm. Raymond took the lesson to heart. Martha Jewel Beck, born in Florida in 1920, had never been desired. Her weight made her the target of ridicule, and her life was filled with shame and rejection. When she became pregnant out of wedlock, she spun a tragic tale. Her baby's father had died a war hero. The town pitied her, but the lie was only the beginning. She lived for romance, escaping into novels and movies, dreaming of a man who would see her, want her. And then she met Raymond. Through a Lonely Hearts ad, they connected. She gave up everything for him, her home, her children, her identity. When she learned he was a con man, she didn't flinch. She didn't just accept his dark side. Martha became part of it. Together, they formed a deadly alliance, a twisted love story written in the blood of innocent women. Martha was the perfect accomplice. She posed as Fernandez's sister, giving their victims a false sense of security. Women looking for love believed they were stepping into a romance, unaware they were walking into a death trap. Their first known victim, 66-year-old Janet Fay, thought she had found a second chance at love when she became engaged to Fernandez. She never saw Martha's jealousy coming. When Martha found them in bed together, she snapped. Her rage was blind. She grabbed a hammer and swung with all her strength, again and again, as Janet's skull cracked under the force. Fernandez finished the job, strangling her as her blood pooled beneath them. But this was just the beginning. In Michigan, the killers found their next victim, 28-year-old Delphine Downing, a widow with a 2-year-old daughter. Downing had no idea she was welcoming murderers into her home. When she became suspicious, Fernandez drugged her. But it was her daughter's terrified cries that sealed their fate. Beck, unable to bear the child sobbing, wrapped her hands around the little girl's throat and squeezed. She didn't kill her. Yet. When Delphine woke up to see her bruised daughter, Fernandez panicked. He shot Delphine in the head. With her mother dead, the little girl had no one to protect her. 2 days later, Beck drowned the child in a basin of water. Their bodies were buried in the basement, but suspicions had already risen. When neighbors reported the Downing's sudden disappearance, police arrived at the home, arresting the murderous couple. Under interrogation, Fernandez quickly confessed, but they denied the 17 additional murders linked to them. Martha, still hopelessly in love, tried to protect her man. "I would rather die with Raymond than live without him," she said. And she got her wish. They were extradited to New York, where they faced trial for the murder of Janet Fay. The courtroom was packed, the public hungry for details about the sick love affair that had claimed so many lives. The verdict was swift: death. On March 8, 1951, Fernandez and Beck were led to the execution chamber at Sing Sing. Fernandez, ever the charmer, maintained his composure. Beck, once meek and obedient, let her true emotions show. "My story is a love story," she declared. "But only those tortured with love can understand what I mean." Minutes later, they were both dead, their love affair burned out in the electric chair. We hear their last words, their final moments, but does any of it really matter? Can a lifetime of horror be erased with a few regrets at the end? Or are some crimes so unforgivable no remorse could ever make a difference? What do you think? If you like the way we create these videos and you want to help bring more cases like this to light, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives. Thank you for watching.